Hi, my name is Connor, and in the past year, I have quite frankly probably put too many hours into the game of Root. On Steam, don't start the video. Hold on. 1 second. Hi, my name is Connor, and it took me like double the amount of time to find this log as it did last time, so I'm exhausted, but I did feel the need to re-record this intro because I have been working on this project for like 6 months, and a lot has changed since I started it. Originally, this was supposed to be one long video, but after trying to balance the audio of a few of these sections together, I decided it was probably better just to drip feed each one as its own video to my viewers. So, if you happen to be one of my 400 subscribers who happens to like Root, for once in Icarus Panda history, you will be eating good with like consistent uploads for just a little bit. But yeah, this is my ranking of the Root factions from my least favorites to my favorites. We got a lot of ground to cover. I started playing Root about 2 years ago when I picked the game up when I went to downtown location that I won't say to not dox myself, with my girlfriend. It was a lovely day. I bought Root and just instantly, it was my favorite game. You know, it's inspired me to work on my own asymmetrical game. I realized that asymmetry is what I like in games, and it's what I like designing. As soon as I started playing it, I knew that I was going to be making a ranking series, and here we are. So before I get started, I want to just lay down a few ground rules. Similar to my Cosmic video, this is not a power ranking. I'm not discussing, how strong each faction is. Although, if you want my general thoughts somewhere here, I'll put my tier list. Secondly, I want to give a huge shout out to the Woodland Warriors Discord and our Root Lord and Savior, Nebuchadnezzar. Nev helped me a lot. He gave me a bunch of assets that just streamlined the process of making this video a lot, and we had a really awesome conversation. Just really cool dude, so shoutouts to him. And of course, shoutouts to the Woodland Warriors Discord. That's where you can find like all things leader games. I play Root in there all the time, so if you want to play Root with me, that's where I'll be. Not only have I just played so many games that have helped me determine my rankings for this video, but everyone in there is super nice and just like super helpful. Some people have helped me with stats for this video. Other people have helped with like just strategy discussion and design discussion even of like how I feel about certain things. So definitely check out that if, you're into any of the leader games. And last but not least, I want to make something clear. Something in the Root community that comes up very often when discussing the game is like house rules, or like how I could change a faction to make the game more balanced. Homebrew is like kind of baked into the game a little bit. There's an entire weird Root community. People make fan factions for the game. Modding the game is part of the game. With that being said, I will be like saying things in this video where there might be parts of factions that I wish were different or played differently, and I'll be discussing that. But I don't want it to come off as I think I could do it better than Cole, because I don't. This is my favorite game ever, and even if I hate Vagabond with a passion, it's still my favorite game ever. I don't know, I've just been watching a lot of Elden Ring critiques this year because the DLC came out. I just find it a little egotistical and like a little daft. Be like, oh yeah, if you just change this and this and this, the game is perfect. Simple changes. I can't believe they didn't think about this.
I genuinely believe that if healing speed was increased to 1.5 to 2 times, a good amount of the difficulty complaints would resolve. This seems like an easy fix for FromSoft to add, but they will never do it because they want you to die a bunch.
Game design is a very complex thing, and I don't think that, any of my design suggestions would necessarily work instantaneously or at all even. You should take them as fan fiction. When I make suggestions, they're more of I wish this mechanic worked in a certain way or felt differently than it does. I think you'll see more of what I mean when you actually see me discussing the factions. I just wanted to make that clear. So with all that being said, let's get to my hatred of vagabonds. Yeah. Okay. Let's get it.
Number 10. The Completely Broken Vagabond.
The first game of Root I ever played, I played as the Vagabond. And I was like,
oh shit. Would you look at that? It's a faction in a war game where instead of playing as an army, you just play as one piece. That's pretty cool and innovative. Yo, other people can craft these items, and I can take them to use them as my actions? That is a super neat way of controlling your character. What the hell, there's 9 of them.
So about that.
I've never been so wrong in all my life.
I know what you're thinking. I'm gonna complain about infamy for the next 10 minutes, and I'm not gonna subvert your expectations. I will be complaining about infamy at some point in the next 10 minutes. However, Vagabond actually commits an even bigger sin than being overpowered. He's fucking boring. I'm gonna start my rant about Vagabond's lack of interaction with a quote from someone who's able to express their ideas in a much more clear and concise way than I am. Whoever wrote this article over at Chits and Giggles summarizes what makes Vagabond so detested perfectly.
Besides battle and occasionally the character card's special ability, most of Vagabond's remaining mechanics are one-way mechanics. These are actions that require another player, but either have no bearing on the other player, or is done so in a way where the other player has no leverage or counter actions. For example, the aid action, supposedly a central part of the Vagabond's design and the driver of their main feature, the relationships, is incredibly boring. Even though I get a card, I cannot leverage the Vagabond's aid into my strategy. As another faction, I cannot rely on the Vagabond to provide consistent aid. When I do get aid, I cannot guarantee that the card I get will be useful. And furthermore, I cannot refuse the aid.
This, in my opinion, is Vagabond's greatest design flaw as a faction. He simply doesn't have enough interaction going either way to make playing as or against him particularly interesting.
One of the most rewarding parts of playing Root is learning how you can properly counterplay each faction in the game. For example, the first time players witness Woodland Alliance jump from 14 to 30 points in one turn, they'll most likely have this type of reaction.
What the fuck? Well, I guess you just gone and bloody done it then, am I right, boys?
But then you learn to make sure that they can't leave their bases. Then you learn to start forcing them to revolt in shitty spots. Then you learn what sympathy you need to destroy and when to use that action for something better. Overall, you generally just start to have a better idea of where the weaknesses of each faction lie and become able to deal with them in new and dynamic ways. With Vagabond, on the other hand, your options are either to A, beat the ever-loving shit out of him, and or B, don't craft. Unfortunately, not crafting isn't an airtight solution. You still can't control what Vagabond gets into their hand, and there are a few ways for Vagabond to gain cards anyway, making this strategy kind of feel like shit from both sides. On the Vagabond side, you're forced to hope for a good card draw, putting basically the entire game into the hands of the dreaded RNGesus. Even if you start with good cards in your hand, on most of the Vagabonds you'll have to hope for a 1 in 4 chance that you actually pull the hammer from the ruins in order to craft. Conversely, Vagabond's opponents are going to feel like hot garbage if they didn't craft tea for the easy 2 points, only to have the Vagabond top deck it anyway, and now there's only 1 or no tea left to craft.
In no way are Vagabond's opponents dealing with him in an interesting or interactive way. They're simply stopping themselves from doing something
that they otherwise would. And as I've just shown, it's not even foolproof. Your other option of slowing the Vagabond down, jumping him, feels more like a tax than a proper counterplay to the faction. No one wants to do it because it doesn't get you any points, and I can kinda get down with the idea that you have to collectively set back Vagabond, but the issue with that is, you'll have to work collectively to slow down most of the factions en route. The way you slow down other factions is much more interactive and dynamic, and those factions can be properly punished for being greedy. Vagabond, however, is extremely difficult to punish. Since the Vagabond damages items of their choice when they're attacked, they effectively get to decide what actions they'll lose. This can make stopping Vagabond near impossible in the endgame, since in many games, they'll only need a few swords to put themselves over the finish line. If you do manage to break a bunch of Vagabond's items, they'll be forced to forest. Congratulations! Now the Vagabond player loses a full turn of the game. Even though I love to watch the Vagabond player suffer, I can't say that I think this leads to a satisfying result for any of the players involved either. For the Vagabond player, you are losing entire turns. The average length of a root game is roughly 7 turns, so if you're forested twice in a game, you are on average not playing for roughly a third of the entire game. This is Vagabond's main counterplay, by the way. This is apparently how I'm supposed to interact with this faction. It's fun and interactive, apparently. And it's not like the other 5 turns you'll be playing on average are such bangers that it makes up for the lost 2 turns you spent smoking weed in the forest. For Vagabond's opponents, they get to watch as the Vagabond player flips all of their items back up, essentially completely refilling their health bar and undoing everything that they just did, which is, mildly infuriating. It truly blows my mind that factions like moles, badgers, and even lizards are punished so heavily for losing their cardboard, but Vagabond is able to just walk through hell and back, and he's chilling. 1v9 my League of Legends game, maybe he'll have to use a hammer. Depends on what actions he decided to lose. I don't know, I just don't really like it. I don't get it. I will say, I understand I'm getting negative, and I've been a hater for the last 5 minutes. But I want you to remember, this is my favorite board game ever. I've played over 400 hours of this game. Now, another thing I don't understand is, how can a relationship be uninteractive? I don't know, but Vagabond, back at it again. He did it again. How did he do it? How does he do it? How does he do it every time? The relationship mechanic is ironically named, since other players have little to no bearing over how their relationship with Vagabond actually develops. The only thing a player could do to change their relationship with Vagabond on their terms is attack the Vagabond in order to turn themselves hostile. This is often done pretty early in the game with marquees to stop the Vagabond's early movement. And while I wouldn't call myself a Vagabond sympathizer, I will say that this makes for maybe the most unenjoyable root experience that I've ever had. If you only have 1 boot, or even if you have 2 to be honest, you can get seriously landlocked, creating even more turns on this epic character where you do essentially nothing. It's honestly a shame that this mechanic is as one-dimensional as it is, because I think it has a lot of potential to be really cool. In my head canon, the best way to improve on this mechanic would be to make it so that the Vagabond's opponents have equal or at least more say in how their relationship with Vagabond develops compared to how much they currently do, which is not much. Very little, almost 0.
Sometimes it actually is 0, because if they don't have a sword, you actually can't make them. That actually literally just happened in a game of mine. I had like 5 wizards on a thing, and whoop, just take them out. I don't need them. Who needs those guys?
Other factions could give Vagabond cards and get points for improving their relationship. This could be a fun push-pull kind of mechanic, where you might be giving the Vagabond a bit of momentum through items, but it could also benefit you through points. If your relationship with Vagabond goes to shit, you should definitely get points for beating him up. That would make sense thematically too, since Vagabond is supposed to represent an RPG-like character. This guy just lit your entire village on fire. If the Vagabond is actually infamous to you, you should get something for beating him up. As it stands, I'm going to need to go to couples therapy with Vagabond since our relationship is so one-sided.
Speaking of infamy, I think now would be a perfect time to discuss my thoughts on the topic. Yeah, I mean, that shit is broken as hell, you know? What do you want me to say? Hey.
Infamy scores points way faster than basically everything else in the game, and since Vagabond's combat is so good, you'll only really need to chomp up 1 or 2 clearings in order to burst to the finish. This has been talked about ad nauseum in like 3 different places, so there's not really too much else to say about it. Most competitive groups will use Despot Infamy, a rule that makes Vagabond's infamy work similarly to Erie's Despot Leader. Instead of scoring an extra point for each piece destroyed by Vagabond, Vagabond will only get 1 extra point if they destroyed any hostile pieces in their combat. This is a pretty accepted hotfix to the faction, although there are some naysayers who don't buy completely into Despot Infamy. A big point that's usually brought up with that is that in the competitive league that currently doesn't even have rats or badgers, Vagabond is usually behind Erie and Moles in terms of win rate. In my opinion though, it really doesn't matter either way. Infamy is kind of just the icing on this poorly made cake. Vagabond would need a complete rework from the ground up in order to be a pleasant play experience for me, and although the Band-Aid patch of Despot Infamy may fix how broken Infamy is, it can't cover the wounds of the rest of Vagabond's design.
Now, with all that shit being talked, I think it's time that we finally talk about some positives about the Vagabond. On this channel, you know I'm always appreciating some good old board game drip. In Cosmic Encounter, it was our boy Spiff, and Hare and Tortoise, I mean, I'm rooting for the hare, that's all I'm saying, you know what I mean? And I gotta say that the Vagabonds, they're pretty dripped out.
I finally got my Vagabond Pieces pack right before filming this video, and I have to say, these look really cool and make me actually like the faction a bit more. Giving each Vagabond their own piece, I think will help my playgroup differentiate between each one of them, and I look forward to all my friends getting familiar with each one's bullshit. I also have to say that I just love the idea that there are 9 different Vagabonds, each one having their own unique ability. It helps create even more playstyles within a game that already has 10 distinct playstyles. With that being said, I'm gonna end this segment off by ranking the Vagabonds from my least favorite to my favorite. Number 9, Arbiter. Starting with 2 swords is completely broken and takes away half of your counterplay options against this faction. His ability would be cool, if you could use it. It is completely useless, actually. It is terrible, which is just really cringe. Number 8, Tinker. For obvious reasons, this guy is low. He is most likely the most broken thing in the game if you are playing with the standard deck, and is still pretty strong with exiles and partisans. Number 7, Ranger. Starting with a Glock and a sword, plus being able to repair 3 items a turn, makes this guy an absolute chore to play against. Number 6, Harrier. Having the ability to teleport is just really obnoxious, I'm gonna be honest. Number 5, Ronin. This guy is pretty basic. His ability isn't very good since you're giving up attacking actions to use it, but it can be helpful in niche situations. Number 4, Thief. Pretty basic Vagabond with an ability that isn't entirely overbearing. This one gets a pass for me. Number 3, Adventurer. This to me is a Vagabond worth playing. He leans into a specific mechanic of the faction that isn't strictly killing everyone. Adventurer was my number 1 pick originally, but then I realized starting with a hammer is like kind of crazy, which makes me like him a little bit less. Number 2, Scoundrel. My favorite design visually of all the Vagabonds. He's absolutely dripped out, and having a one-time super nuke is a pretty cool and unique ability. He also sucks which I think is funny and makes me like him more. Being so bad that you're playing this faction on hard mode is pretty cool. Number 1, Vagrant. By far the coolest Vagabond power, and it's not even close. I'm not even sure if the ability is good, but goddamn is it cool. Also, he starts with 3 items, so once again, you're playing on hard mode. Okay, that's it, we're done here.
So in conclusion, yeah, Vagabond is my least favorite faction in the game. I love him, I love looking at him, but painful to play against. So this is going to be the most negative section of this video, I promise. It is all uphill from here. So let's get on to number 9. Hey man, I think you forgot about something. It's, oh god, no! No! No, please, no! No, please. No. Did you actually think I was gonna forget about coalitions? Because I totally did. I actually wrote this entire script and forgot to mention them a single time except for this one meme. This meme made me remember I wanted to talk about them.
As you can probably tell, I'm not a fan of coalitions. Their counterpart, Dominance, offers an additional way to win a game of Root, but realistically, only cats, moles, lizards, and rats have enough pieces to pull one off. Even then, a Dominance win is exceedingly rare. And since the 9 other factions have an additional way to win, it's only fair that we give Vagabond another way to win too. It's not like Vagabond gets a bunch of additional things that no other faction gets, right? While Dominance is the highest risk and the highest reward on every other faction, coalitions for Vagabond are kind of just a get out of jail free card for, hold on. Oh yeah, losing the game.
I think the design intent here is to turn the game into a 2v2, which is actually a pretty cool idea. In my experience though, almost all coalitions are formed the turn of or turn before the game ends. Once the Vagabond player has realized that they're just gonna get outpaced to the finish.
The Vagabond has to form their coalition with the player in last place, which at a glance seems terrible. Factions in Root don't score linearly though. I'd much rather be Woodland at 15 with half of my sympathy out than a Crows player at 23 with only 1 or 2 plots out. More often than not, Vagabond is going to form coalitions with the factions that slowly build up and then burst to the finish, such as Woodland, Lizards, and Moles. And what do all 3 of those factions have in common? They are all fiends for big hands of cards. Vagabond turns into all of these factions' personal drug dealer by juicing them up with cards, and then Moles proceeds to banker 8 cards to the finish. It's really, really sick. The player in last might not even necessarily be that far behind. They might be in last by like 1 point, or in really close games, they could be in last with like 20 plus points. And you can just coalition with them, and then they just win the game on the next turn, and now you win. Why? Coalitions definitely need a bit of a design overhaul in order to make them work, in my opinion. If it were up to me, I'd honestly just remove them. Vagabond gets enough action replay hacks as it is, so I don't think an alternative to Dominance is even really necessary. It's not like most factions are busting out Dominance every other game. But if I were to change it, I might make it so that you'd have to declare your coalition before you, or maybe any player hits 20 points. That way, you'll really have to bet on a player, and you'll really have to help them out, instead of just sliding into their DMs at the last second to take the dub.
Then again, I honestly could just be salty at the amount of League games I've lost that I've just thought I've had in the bag, only for the coalition player to just, you know, do a little right past me on the last turn. But, you know, it is what it is. Feels bad, man. Anyway, let's actually get to number 9 this time, instead of being distracted by a game mechanic that I completely forgot about.